How did I find out the stains on my sheets weren't mine? My roommate Jenna was holding my comforter up to the light, making a disgusted face. "Girl, what the hell is this?" she said, pointing at the crusty patches near the middle of my fitted sheet. "This is nasty. When's the last time you got laid?" I hadn't been with anyone in 4 months, not since Nicholas and I broke up, but these stains were fresh, that unmistakable bleach smell still strong enough to make my stomach turn. "Those aren't mine," I said slowly. Jenna laughed. "Right, must be the cum fairy." But I knew they weren't mine. I'd been at my mom's all weekend for my sister's baby shower, left Friday morning, came back Sunday night. These stains weren't there when I'd made my bed Thursday. "Were you in my room while I was gone?" I asked. Her face did this thing, this quick flash of something before settling into confusion. "Why would I go in your room?" "I don't know, that's why I'm asking. You're being paranoid. Maybe they're old and you just noticed them now." But I knew my sheets. I'm obsessive about my bed. Clean sheets every Sunday, hospital corners, everything perfect. These stains were new. That night, I found a long brown hair on my pillow. Jenna had brown hair, but she always insisted it was auburn. This was definitely brown. And there was something else, a earring back on my nightstand. Not mine. "Hey, Jenna," I called out. "Did someone lose an earring back?" She came to my doorway. "Nope. Why?" I held it up. "Found this on my nightstand. Weird. Maybe it's been there forever." But I'd cleaned that nightstand Saturday morning before leaving. The next weekend, I told Jenna I was going to my mom's again. Made a big show of packing, said goodbye, drove away. But I only went to the Starbucks 3 blocks over, waited 2 hours, then walked back. Our apartment door was locked. Good. I unlocked it quietly and heard it immediately. Voices from my room. Jenna's voice and a guy's. "She won't be back until tomorrow," Jenna was saying. "Her bed's so much better than mine." I stood frozen in our living room, listening to them in my bed. The squeaking, the sounds, in my sheets. I wanted to burst in, but I needed proof. Started recording on my phone, then loudly dropped my keys. "Shit," I heard Jenna say. Scrambling sounds, footsteps. By the time she opened my bedroom door, she was alone, wearing my robe. "You're back early," she said, too bright, too loud. "Who's in there?" "What? Nobody. I was looking for my phone charger." The window in my room was open, fire escape, but men's shoes were still visible under my bed. "Those are some big shoes for a phone charger." Her face went red. "Okay, fine. I had someone over, but my bed is broken and get out of my room." The guy crawled out from under the bed. Tom from her marketing class. The one she claimed was just a friend to her boyfriend Alex. After they left, I looked at my bed. Fresh stains on my sheets, my pillows on the floor. My entire room smelled like sex and Jenna's vanilla perfume. "It's not a big deal," Jenna said from my doorway. "I'll wash your sheets." "How many times?" "What? How many times have you used my bed?" She shrugged. "I don't know. A couple." I pulled up my calendar. Every weekend I'd been gone. Every overnight shift at the restaurant. All these times? "You're never here. Your bed is better. My mattress is basically on the floor. So you've been fucking guys in my bed?" "Guy, singular, just Tom, while you're dating Alex?" Her face changed. "That's none of your business. It is when you're cheating on him in my bed." She stepped closer. "You're not going to tell him. Watch me. I'll tell everyone you gave me bed bugs." "What?" "I'll post it everywhere. Reviews on every apartment site, your Instagram, tag you. Nobody will ever want to live with you again." "That's insane. We don't have bed bugs." She pulled out her phone, showed me a draft post, photos of fake bug bites on her arm, a receipt for an exterminator consultation. "I've been preparing, just in case you found out. You're psychotic. I'm practical. Keep your mouth shut and I'll stop using your room." But she didn't stop. I bought a hidden camera, put it in my stuffed bear on the dresser. Caught her the very next day. I had a double shift. Her and Tom. In my bed. Again. When I confronted her with the footage, she laughed. "You recorded me without consent? That's illegal. I could sue you." She was right. In our state, recording without consent in a private space was a felony. "But you went in my room without—" "We're roommates. I was checking if you left the window open. Tom happened to be over. Things happened. Prove otherwise." I was trapped. She had Alex convinced she was at study groups. She had our mutual friends believing I was the crazy paranoid roommate. She even told our landlord I was harassing her. Last week, I found out she'd made copies of my key and was giving them to multiple guys. I stood there holding my phone with shaking hands after seeing the text from Tom's friend, asking if I had a spare key since his wasn't working. Multiple strangers now had keys to my bedroom. The violation felt so complete that I actually laughed. It came out weird and broken, a sound that scared me more than crying would have. I grabbed my laptop right there in the hallway and started searching for emergency locksmith services. 24-hour service, immediate installation, 5-star reviews. Then I remembered my lease. Any lock changes needed landlord approval in writing, minimum 48 hours notice. Jenna would report unauthorized modifications immediately. She'd done it before when I tried to install a door chain. I closed the laptop and wedged a chair under my doorknob instead. The couch felt safer than my violated bed anyway. Every footstep in the hallway made me jump. Around 3 in the morning, I heard it. Someone trying a key in our front door. The lock turned halfway, then stopped. Footsteps retreated down the hall when it didn't work. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning at work, my hands shook so bad I nearly dropped a full tray of breakfast orders. 8 plates, 4 coffees, all headed for the floor until Jasmine caught the edge. She steadied it with one hand while grabbing my elbow with the other. During our break, she pulled me into the storage room. "What's going on?" she asked. I tried to say I was fine but started crying instead. Everything spilled out. The bed, the stains, the keys, the blackmail about bedbugs. Jasmine listened without interrupting. When I finished, she pulled out her phone. "My cousin went through something like this with her roommate," she said. "There's a tenant rights clinic downtown that helped her." She found the number and made me save it. After my shift, I sat in my car and called the housing clinic. The receptionist transferred me to Leilani Waters. Her voice was calm but serious as I explained everything. "Recording without consent is illegal, you're right about that," she said. "But you have other options for documenting harassment." She walked me through what evidence would help. Photos, timestamps, written records of every incident. "File a police report about the key distribution," Leilani said. "They probably can't prosecute without more proof, but it creates an official paper trail." She gave me the address of the closest precinct. At the police station, the officer behind the desk looked tired but listened carefully. He typed everything into his computer. The unauthorized keys, the bedroom violations, the bedbug threats. "Without proof of who has these keys, there's not much we can do right now," he said. "But this goes in the system." He printed out a case number for me. The drive home took forever. My bedroom door was slightly open when I got there. I knew I'd closed it. I'd checked 3 times before leaving. My bed was messed up, sheets pulled back, pillows on the floor. A used condom wrapper sat in my trash can. The smell made me gag. This time I didn't touch anything. I took photos from every angle, making sure the timestamps showed clearly. The wrapper, the rumpled sheets, the moved furniture. I emailed everything to myself with detailed descriptions. Then I forwarded it all to Leilani with the police case number. She responded within minutes saying this was exactly what we needed to start building our case. The documented pattern of violations would help establish harassment even without the illegal recording. I slept on Jasmine's couch that night after she insisted I couldn't stay in that apartment alone. She lived in a studio 20 minutes away, but it felt safer than my own bedroom. The next morning, she drove me back to get work clothes. Jenna was in the kitchen making coffee like nothing had happened. "Sleep well?" she asked with this little smile. I didn't answer, just grabbed my uniform and left. At work, I kept checking my phone for updates from Leilani. She was researching similar cases and said we might have grounds for a restraining order if we could prove ongoing harassment. The key distribution alone might be enough since it created a safety issue. During my lunch break, I started a spreadsheet documenting every incident I could remember. Dates, times, what I found, who might have been involved. The pattern was clear when I looked at it all together. Every time I worked a double shift or visited my mom, something happened. Jasmine helped me remember details I'd forgotten, like the time I found men's deodorant in my bathroom that wasn't mine, or when my jewelry box had been moved even though nothing was missing. Small things that seemed paranoid alone but painted a picture together. Leilani called that afternoon with news. Another tenant in my building had complained about Jenna 2 years ago. The details were sealed, but it established a pattern of behavior. We could request those records for our case. She also suggested installing a door sensor that would alert my phone when my bedroom door opened. Completely legal since it only monitored my private space, not common areas. I ordered one that night for overnight delivery. The package arrived before work the next morning, and I was setting it up when someone knocked on my apartment door. Ryan from building maintenance stood there with his toolbox, holding a work order on his clipboard. "Got a request to check your heating unit," he said, looking confused. I hadn't called about any heating problems, but I let him in anyway, watching him walk through the living room toward the radiator. "Actually, while you're here," I said, trying to sound casual, "my bedroom door lock feels kind of loose." He followed me to my room and bent down to examine the doorknob, running his fingers along the metal plate. His face changed as he tested the mechanism, twisting it back and forth. "Someone's definitely been messing with this," he said quietly. "See these scratch marks? That's from someone trying to copy the lock pattern." He stood up and looked around to make sure Jenna wasn't nearby. "I can't officially say anything, but if this lock happened to break while I was checking it, we'd have to do an emergency replacement today." I nodded quickly and watched him pull out his screwdriver, working on the lock mechanism until something inside made a sharp cracking sound. Within minutes, he was on his phone with the main office, explaining how the lock had failed during routine maintenance and needed immediate replacement for safety reasons. The landlord approved it right away since a broken bedroom lock was a security issue. While Ryan filled out the emergency work order, my phone buzzed with a text from Alex asking if we could meet for coffee. My stomach dropped because I figured Jenna had already started spinning stories about me to him. I told Ryan I'd be back in an hour and drove to the coffee shop 3 blocks away, finding Alex already sitting at a corner table. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his coffee untouched in front of him. "Is Jenna cheating on me?" he asked before I even sat down. Tom said something weird at a party last night when he was drunk. I sat there for a second, choosing my words carefully. I can't share certain things for legal reasons, but your suspicions are valid. His face went pale when I mentioned the key situation, explaining how multiple guys had copies of my bedroom key. I've been paying half her rent, he said slowly, while she's been giving other guys access to your room. The disgust in his voice matched exactly how I'd been feeling for weeks. We talked for another 10 minutes before I had to get back for the locksmith, and Alex promised to help however he could with evidence or testimony. Back at the apartment, the locksmith was already working on my door while Ryan supervised the installation. I made sure to get all 3 copies of the new keys directly from the locksmith's hands, not letting them sit on any counter where Jenna might grab one. I tucked one key into my work locker that afternoon, gave another to Jasmine when she stopped by after her shift, and kept the third on my keychain. The new lock was solid, much better than the old one, with a deadbolt that actually worked properly. Around 7 that evening, I heard Jenna's key scraping against my door, then her cursing when it wouldn't turn. She banged on the door hard enough to shake the frame. "Why the fuck did you change the lock?" she yelled. "Open this door right now." I stayed calm, speaking through the door without opening it. "Maintenance had to replace a broken lock for safety reasons. I have the work order if you need to see it." She stomped away, and I heard her in her room, voice raised as she made phone call after phone call, probably trying to figure out her next move. The next morning, my phone started blowing up with texts from people I hadn't talked to in weeks. "Are you okay?" one mutual friend asked. "Jenna says you're having some kind of breakdown." Another message said Jenna was concerned about my mental stability and wondering if I needed help. She'd started a whole campaign overnight, telling everyone I was paranoid and unstable, that she was worried about living with someone so unpredictable. I screenshot every message, adding them to the folder of evidence Leilani had told me to keep. The pattern was so clear now, how she turned everything around to make herself the victim, while systematically destroying my reputation. 3 more people texted that day, all buying into her narrative about my supposed mental health crisis. One even suggested I should talk to someone professional about my paranoia issues with Jenna. I wanted to scream the truth at all of them, tell them about the bed, the keys, the threats, but Leilani had warned me to stay quiet and let the legal process handle it. Instead, I just responded that I was fine and appreciated their concern, keeping my replies short and neutral. Jasmine was the only one who saw through Jenna's lies, texting me that she'd overheard Jenna at a campus coffee shop spinning elaborate stories about my erratic behavior to anyone who would listen. The door sensor I'd installed started sending alerts to my phone, showing my door hadn't been opened since I'd left for work, which at least meant Jenna couldn't get in anymore. That afternoon at work, Jasmine pulled me aside during our break and looked at me with real worry in her eyes. She said I should stay at her place for a few nights each week, just to be safe from whatever Jenna might try next. Her apartment was tiny, just a studio really, but she had good locks and a doorman who actually paid attention to who came and went. I almost cried at the offer because having someone who believed me felt so good after weeks of people thinking I was crazy. When I got home that night to pack an overnight bag, I went to my filing box to grab my birth certificate and social security card just in case I needed them. The papers were there, but they'd been moved around, not in the order I always kept them in. My hands started shaking as I went through everything, and found my passport had been opened to the photo page, and my bank statements were out of their folder. Someone had definitely gone through all my important documents while I had that old lock on my door. I grabbed everything that mattered, my laptop, all my papers, some jewelry my grandma left me, and stuffed it all in a backpack to take to Jasmine's place. The next morning, while I was at Jasmine's eating cereal, Leilani called with news that made me sit up straight. Another tenant in my building had filed a complaint about Jenna 2 years ago for the exact same kind of behavior. The records were sealed because of privacy laws, but just knowing there was a pattern that could help my case made me feel less alone. Leilani gave me the former tenant's first name and said I might be able to find her on social media if I wanted to try reaching out. I spent my lunch break searching Facebook and Instagram until I found someone with that name who'd posted old photos tagged at our building. Her profile was mostly private, but I sent her a message explaining who I was and asking if she'd be willing to talk about her experience with Jenna. She responded within an hour saying she'd been waiting for someone else to reach out because she knew Jenna would do it again. We set up a phone call for that evening, and when we talked, her story made my stomach turn. Jenna had done the exact same thing to her, using her bed when she was gone, giving out copies of her key, then using blackmail and threats when she got caught. This girl had tried to fight back, but Jenna turned all their mutual friends against her and made her life so bad she finally just broke her lease and moved out. She said losing the deposit and paying the penalty was worth it just to get away from Jenna's games. Armed with this information and the police reports I'd filed, I scheduled a meeting with the landlord for the next day and asked Leilani to come as my advocate. We sat in his cramped office while I laid out everything: the pattern of behavior, the other tenant's experience, the police report about the keys being given out, all of it. The landlord shifted in his chair and kept looking at his phone while we talked, clearly not wanting to deal with any of this. He said without concrete proof of actual lease violations. His hands were tied, but after Leilani pointed out his liability if something happened because of those copied keys, he agreed to send Jenna a formal warning about unauthorized key distribution. 2 days later, I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard Jenna screaming from her room after getting the warning letter. She stormed out and got right in my face, yelling that I was trying to get her evicted and she'd make my life so miserable I'd have to move out myself. I just stood there holding my coffee mug, not saying anything, which seemed to make her even madder. That night around 2 a.m., I woke up to music blasting from Jenna's room so loud my walls were shaking. I texted her asking her to turn it down, and she texted back that she was just studying and I was being paranoid again about noise that wasn't even that loud. The music kept going until 2:45, just 15 minutes before the noise ordinance would kick in and I could call the cops. This happened every single night after that, always starting around 2 a.m. and always stopping right before 3 when it would become illegal. I started documenting everything with timestamps and recordings on my phone, building a file of evidence that showed the pattern of harassment. On the 5th night of this, my phone buzzed with a text from Alex saying he'd broken up with Jenna and wanted to help me however he could. He said she'd admitted to him in anger about giving out my room keys, and he'd testify about it if this ever went to court. I felt bad for him finding out about Tom this way, but having another person willing to back up my story gave me hope that maybe I could actually win this fight. The music was still going in the background as I texted him back, thanking him for reaching out and saying I'd definitely take him up on his offer if things got to that point. The music cut off at exactly 2:45 like always, and I finally fell asleep around 4, then dragged myself to work at noon feeling like garbage. My manager took one look at me halfway through lunch rush and pulled me aside between tables. "You look terrible," she said. "What's going on?" I gave her the short version about my roommate making noise every night to mess with me, and she shook her head. "Take the doubles off your schedule for now. Regular shifts only until you sort this out." The relief hit me so hard I almost cried right there in the restaurant. Getting actual sleep made such a difference that by the next week I could think straight again and started making real plans instead of just reacting to whatever Jenna threw at me. Jasmine noticed the change immediately and said her friend who worked security could help me track if anyone was going in my room. He came over that evening with this tiny sensor that stuck to my door frame and connected to an app on my phone. "Completely legal since it's your private space," he said while setting it up. "You'll get a notification every time that door opens." The thing was so small you couldn't even see it unless you knew where to look. Perfect. I tested it a few times to make sure it worked, then headed to my shift feeling like I finally had some control back. The next day at work, my phone buzzed 3 different times with door alerts. First one at 10:15 a.m. when Jenna should have been in her marketing class. Second at 1:30 p.m. during her supposed study group. Third at 3:45 p.m. when she had that internship she was always bragging about. I screenshot everything including her class schedule that she'd posted on Instagram last month showing exactly where she claimed to be during those times. When I got home that night, I forwarded all the screenshots and timestamps to Leilani, who added them to the file she was building. "This is good," she wrote back. "Shows pattern of unauthorized entry, plus lying about whereabouts. Building strong case for lease violation, or letting you break lease without penalty." I was reading her email when someone knocked on the door. Ryan from maintenance stood there with his tool bag. "Smoke detector check," he said loud enough for Jenna to hear from her room, then dropped his voice. "Need to tell you something." He went through the motions of checking the detector in the hallway while telling me Jenna had approached him yesterday offering him $50 for a copy of my new room key. Told her no way and reported it to management immediately. They weren't happy. My stomach did this weird flip knowing she was that desperate to get back in my room. Ryan finished his fake inspection and left, but 2 days later the landlord showed up with an official lease violation notice for Jenna. She must have been in her room because I heard her shriek when he knocked on her door. The paper he gave her said she had 30 days to correct her behavior or face eviction for attempting to bribe building staff for unauthorized key access. The screaming from her room went on for an hour after he left. 3 days after that, I was home alone doing laundry when someone knocked. A guy in a city health department jacket stood there with a clipboard. "We got a complaint about bed bugs in this unit. Need to do an inspection." I let him in even though I knew exactly who called. He spent 20 minutes checking both bedrooms, the couch, all the furniture, even pulled my mattress up to look underneath. Found absolutely nothing because of course there were no bugs. "Waste of my time," he muttered while filling out his report. False complaints like this really tick me off when we have actual infestations to deal with. He gave me a copy of the report that said inspection found no evidence of bed bugs, and noted the complaint appeared to be unfounded. I immediately scanned it and sent it to Leilani, who called me within 5 minutes. "This is perfect." She filed a false report to a government agency. "That's harassment and strengthens our position significantly. Save the original document." I was putting the report in my folder when my phone rang. My manager sounded pissed. "Some guy just showed up here asking for you. When I said you weren't working today, he started yelling about how you need to stop causing problems for his girlfriend. Had to kick him out." "Tom, of course. He's banned from the restaurant now. You okay?" I told her I was fine, but she insisted on walking me to my car after every shift for the next week just in case. 2 nights later, Tom showed up again during dinner rush. I was carrying a tray of food when I saw him come through the door. My manager spotted him at the same time and immediately stepped in front of him. "You need to leave. Now." Tom tried to push past her toward me. "I just need to talk to her for 1 minute." But my manager already had her phone out calling the cops while the kitchen guys came out front. Tom saw them and left, but he sat in his car in the parking lot until my shift ended. My manager and 2 of the cooks walked me to my car, made sure I got in safe, and waited until Tom drove off before letting me leave. The next morning, I went straight to the police station to file another report. The officer who took my statement pulled up my previous reports about the keys and nodded. "Multiple incidents now. With this documentation, we could potentially pursue harassment charges. You might want to consider a restraining order too." I sat in that police station for 2 hours giving my statement and filling out paperwork, thinking about how insane my life had become because my roommate couldn't keep out of my bed. That same night, Jenna was waiting for me in the living room when I got home, and her eyes were red like she'd been crying. She stood up from the couch and started talking about how stressed she'd been with finals coming up and how sorry she was for everything. I pulled out my phone and started recording while she went on about how she never meant for things to get this bad, and she just needed somewhere nice to study with Tom. She kept talking and talking while I just stood there recording every word she said, not giving her any reaction at all. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Alex saying he had something important to show me. He forwarded me a whole chain of messages between him and Jenna, where she straight up admitted she'd been using my bed and giving out copies of my key. In the texts, she kept saying she had no choice because her mattress was too uncomfortable, and mine was so much better. I immediately forwarded everything to Leilani, who called me within 10 minutes saying this was exactly what we needed. She told me to come to her office that afternoon so we could file for an emergency restraining order that would keep Jenna out of my personal space completely. The paperwork took 3 hours to fill out, but Leilani said with all the evidence we had, including the police reports, and now Jenna's own admission in writing, we had a really strong case. The court date got scheduled for the following week, and I felt like I could finally see a way out of this nightmare. 3 days before we were supposed to go to court, I came home from work to find Jenna packing boxes in the living room. She announced she'd found someone to take over her part of the lease and would be completely moved out by the weekend. I watched her throw her stuff into boxes while part of me felt relief, but another part stayed suspicious about the timing. She made a big show of leaving her key on the kitchen counter, but I knew there were still copies floating around somewhere. I called the landlord right away to ask about switching to a different unit in the building since I couldn't trust that all the key copies were accounted for. The landlord must have finally realized how serious this whole situation was, because he offered me a much nicer unit on the 7th floor for the exact same rent I was paying. He said Ryan would personally change all the locks before I moved in and would make sure I was the only one with keys. Moving day came 2 days later, and Jasmine showed up at 7 in the morning with coffee and boxes. Alex arrived an hour later with his truck, and even my manager came by on her day off to help. We had everything packed and moved up to the new apartment in less than 4 hours. Ryan was there installing a brand new deadbolt while we carried boxes, and he handed me all 3 keys directly, making sure I saw that no copies had been made. The new place had better light, thicker walls, and a view of the park instead of the dumpsters. I set up my bedroom exactly how I wanted it with my bed in the corner, where I could see the door and both windows. About a week after I'd settled in, Alex texted me some wild news. Jenna's new roommate had already kicked her out after catching her in her bedroom going through her closet. The girl had posted about it in a local housing group warning people not to live with Jenna, and apparently several other people commented with similar stories. The pattern was continuing, but at least it wasn't my problem to deal with anymore. That former tenant I'd talked to earlier reached out again and said she was starting a private Facebook group for people who'd dealt with roommates like Jenna. Within 2 days, we had 15 members all sharing their stories and advice about dealing with boundary violations and getting help from tenant advocacy groups. Some people had even worse stories than mine, like roommates who'd stolen their identities or sold their belongings. My new apartment started feeling like an actual home instead of a place I was scared to leave. I bought brand new sheets in this soft blue color I'd been wanting forever and arranged all my furniture so everything had its perfect spot. For the first time in months, I could actually sleep through the whole night without waking up worried about who might be in my space. My phone buzzed with an Instagram notification while I was unpacking kitchen boxes in my new place. Tom had sent me a message request that started with, "Hey, I know you probably hate me but," and went on for 3 paragraphs about how sorry he was and how he never meant for things to get so out of hand. I could tell he was scared about the harassment charges because he kept mentioning how he was just a college student trying to graduate and didn't need legal problems on his record. I took screenshots of everything and forwarded them to Leilani without responding, because she told me not to engage with him directly while the case was still active. The next few weeks passed in this weird blur of normal life returning bit by bit. I started sleeping through entire nights without checking my door locks every hour. My appetite came back and I actually enjoyed cooking in my kitchen again instead of just eating takeout at work. The restaurant got busier with summer tourists, and I picked up extra shifts to save money for new furniture. 3 months after moving into the new apartment, my manager called me into her office after the lunch rush. She had this folder on her desk with corporate paperwork, and I thought maybe I was in trouble for something. But then she smiled and said the district manager had approved my promotion to shift supervisor. The raise was bigger than I expected, and meant I could actually afford this apartment on my own, without stressing about every dollar. I signed the paperwork right there, and she gave me my new name tag with supervisor printed under my name. Alex started texting me updates about his therapy sessions every couple weeks. He was working through why he ignored so many red flags with Jenna and learning about manipulation tactics and gaslighting. We met for coffee a few times, and it was weird at first, but then we realized we had this shared experience that bonded us in a strange way. He told me his therapist said Jenna showed classic signs of narcissistic behavior, and that victims often don't realize what's happening until they're completely isolated. Jasmine and I had gotten into this routine of Sunday brunch at the diner near my apartment. She'd show up with her laptop to work on her online classes while I meal prepped for the week. One Sunday, she looked up from her screen and said Jenna should pay her a finder's fee for introducing us, because she'd never had a better friend. We both laughed, but it was true because we'd become really close through everything. She had a key to my place now and would water my plants when I worked doubles. Ryan stopped by my apartment one afternoon to check the smoke detectors and mentioned the building had implemented new security policies. They now required written documentation for any key copies, and tenants had to sign forms acknowledging that unauthorized duplication would result in immediate lease termination. He handed me a copy of the new policy with a note that said, my case had prompted these changes. The management company didn't want another situation like mine happening to other tenants. I was walking to the grocery store when I literally ran into one of the friends who had taken Jenna's side during everything. She looked uncomfortable and started apologizing immediately, saying she had no idea how bad things really were, and that she felt terrible for not believing me. She said Jenna had been so convincing with her lies and manipulation that everyone thought I was the problem. I told her I understood and accepted her apology, but kept walking because I didn't need those people in my life anymore. My sister came to visit about 6 months after I'd moved, and she kept commenting on how different I seemed. We were sitting on my couch watching a movie when she paused it and said, I looked healthier and more relaxed than she'd seen me in over a year. That's when I realized I wasn't constantly checking locks anymore or jumping when I heard footsteps in the hallway. My shoulders weren't tense all the time, and I could actually enjoy being in my own space without fear. She stayed for 3 days and we cooked together and went shopping, and it felt like having a normal life again. My apartment had become this safe space where everything was exactly how I wanted it. I'd bought new sheets in this soft gray color and arranged my furniture so I could see both the door and windows from my bed, but it didn't feel paranoid anymore, just comfortable. Work was going great with my new position, and I was training new servers and handling inventory orders. The extra money meant I could save for the first time in years, and I opened a separate savings account for emergencies. I'd learned to set boundaries with people and wasn't afraid to speak up when something felt wrong. Sometimes I'd think about how that whole nightmare with Jenna had taught me exactly what I wouldn't accept in my life anymore, and that knowledge felt like power. Thanks for sharing this journey with me today. I appreciate you letting me think through everything together. Take care of yourself. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.